Welcome to First. I'm Nichelle Poston along with Mark Eichman and Shirley Min. What really happened on Tulip Street in Wilmington on September 23rd? The family of Jeremy McDowell is searching for answers.
State Treasurer Ken Simpler is offering some answers to questions facing Delaware's economy. He's our first person this week.
And one of those economic answers may be found in a growing wine industry. Delaware Today and First team up for that story. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
It's been over 6 weeks since wheelchair-bound Jeremy McDowell was shot and killed by Wilmington police on Tulip Street. The Wilmington Police Department and the Delaware Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights and Public Trust are all investigating what happened. Meanwhile, the family still wants answers, not believing the explanation offered by police. First Look digs into their story.
Yes, we need a police, we need an ambulance. The man just shot himself.
That's the 911 phone call that led police to 28-year-old Jeremy McDowell. The caller said the paralyzed man was suicidal, but family members of McDowell say that wasn't the case.
He wasn't suicidal. My brother, he would never do that because me and my family are very tight-knit. I don't know if you understand that. We're very close, you know, and he knew that if he would have did something like that, it would have destroyed us.
McDowell's sister, Keandra, also disputes the gun that police say was found on Jeremy.
If there's a gun in evidence, where did it come from? Because my brother did not have no gun on him. So where did it come from?
The ongoing investigation has prohibited comment from law enforcement at this time, and the police department hasn't released much information regarding the September 23rd shooting incident or the names of the officers involved. Only the 911 recording has been released.
Please get the cops here.
He's still moving and the handgun's in his hand?
Yes, he's right here in a wheelchair.
Where did he shoot himself?
He's trying to pull himself up into his wheelchair.
Okay,
This is a bystander's cell phone video showing police arriving on scene.
When Mr. McDowell began to remove the weapon from his waist, the officers engaged him. And as a result of the injuries Mr. McDowell sustained, he lost his life. The officers who responded to work that day did not look to take anyone's life. They came out here because they wanted to help our community. I assure you that not one of those officers intended to take anyone's life that day, and we're again sorry to the family that this encounter ended with the loss of their loved one.
However, a month after the incident, family members still aren't convinced.
In my opinion, I think the officers need to go back into training because evidently they're not. They weren't trained right. I mean, you got to call a suicidal person, you bring a shotgun. As soon as you jump out the car, you say, let me see your hands, pow, and the gun goes off.
They shot him 16 times. They shot him until he fell out the wheelchair, okay?
Now, Keandra is on 2 missions. First, to get answers.
Oh, my God, he was funny. Bam, you know how everybody got a talent or everybody has a hobby. You know what his hobby was? Collecting people.
Keandra is also focused on raising awareness about Jeremy's death through community rallies and marches.
This is really personal, not just because it's my brother, but because it could have been anybody's child. It could have been somebody's uncle. They could have been any color, black, blue, glitter, anything, you know, so.
A recent march drew a mixed crowd of nearly 100 people in Wilmington. Religious leader Tyrone Johnson was among this group supporting the family.
Justice is spelled in many ways and in many different directions. Meaning, first, we would like to know that the wheels of justice are moving expeditiously. There's certain things that the family has not heard that we feel they have a right to hear.
And like I tell everybody, if my brother was suicidal when he got shot and paralyzed in that wheelchair the first time, maybe that obviously would have been then, you know, for him to say, but he didn't. He sucked it up and he continued moving and continued living his life, you know.
While family members continue to search for answers, city officials have said they're focused on getting closure as well.
We have an unfortunate situation here, but we will get to the bottom of this. We want answers just like you want answers. This will be investigated to the fullest, and we will come to some resolution. We will take our time and do a very thorough investigation.
So we just want justice for my brother. That's the main thing, justice for Jeremy McDowell.
According to officials, there were 4 Wilmington police officers involved in the shooting of McDowell in his wheelchair. It happened on the 1800 block of Tulip Street. Since the shooting, the officers have been placed on administrative duty.
What about an independent investigation? Is that something that's happening?
Not at this time, but the Delaware Black Caucus is calling for an independent investigation.
And we've heard a lot from the family about justice and that's what they want. What else are they doing besides just raising awareness about this incident through these marches?
Well, Mark, the family recently hired a lawyer, and now they're looking into filing a civil lawsuit against the Wilmington Police Department, but there's no official word when that will actually take place.
And obviously this incident isn't directly related to the ongoing problem of violence in general in Wilmington, but we can't really ignore the Centers for Disease Control report that came out this week that does address that violence.
Yeah, no, we cannot. That was an effort initiated by City Councilwoman Hanifa Shabazz. She basically wanted to know if violence here is a public health issue. DHSS Secretary Rita Landgraf is interested in those findings.
What we also learned is that these individuals of gun violence, many times were indeed victimized themselves through gun violence, but many times also had been traumatized throughout their life.
And you can read more about the Delaware CDC report and follow our coverage of the McDowell story on newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, the tough lessons of life in football are on stage in a play called Playing the Assassin, and a Centerville artist takes life experiences and creates great landscapes. That's later in First Experience.
Wineries are growing in number in our area. Delaware alone has 4. Along with our content partner, Delaware Today magazine, we look at what might be driving the growth in our region. Pizza Dilly Winery brings a little piece of Tuscany to Felton, where brothers Pete and Tony Pizzadilli planted their first grapes in 1993. A self-taught winemaker, Pete keeps the family-run vineyard going.
I tell everybody I grew up inside of a wine barrel. I remember my father when he used to make wine because he had a winery in Tuscany. And we remember all that, so my brother and I, we tried to put it together.
And they succeeded. Now, Pizzadilli offers 12 varietals made from grapes grown right here.
Our main grape is Chambourcin, which is a French hybrid, which makes a good wine. And then we have Merlot, then we have Chardonnay, and the last couple of years I put Moscato.
Here inside the winery's Bacchus room, named after the Greek god of wine, Pizzadilli takes visitors to the old country in his recreation of a Tuscan cave.
They like to come here because this place is really beautiful. They can bring their lunch, buy a bottle of wine, they can sit in a vineyard.
In the November issue of Delaware Today, reporter Roger Morris writes, young people are flocking to wineries for first dates, girls' Saturday out, yoga classes, weddings, and receptions, while a slightly older crowd uses them as local hangouts. Seeking out experiences is a travel trend Linda Parkowski sees emerging as Delaware's director of tourism.
I think it is a shift, and what it's saying is they'd rather do some sort of activity.
That change in attitude may be why more winemakers are setting up shop in the area, and why wineries in Delaware and in neighboring states Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland recently formed the Vintage Atlantic Wine Region, mapping out more than 40 wineries in a 90-mile radius for potential visitors.
They want to have a memory, and winery trails give that person an experience. They give them a really good visual, they can take a tour, and then there's taste involved.
Here in Delaware, Parkowski says the business of alcohol overall is buzzing. Last year, she had to expand the state's wine and ale trail to accommodate the growing number of craft breweries and distilleries. It's now called the Beer, Wine, and Spirits Trail. Pizzadilli is one of the many stops on the trail, which Parkowski says will include 24 experiences by next spring.
In January, Delaware will host the inaugural Regional Wine Association Convention at Dover Downs, bringing together the regional industry in one room for the first time. Roger Morris joins me now. And Roger, you wrote the winery story in the November issue of Delaware Today. That's not a bad assignment.
It's not. I tell people that I drink for a living.
How'd you get that job? You know, I want to talk about this up-and-coming market here in this region. Are winemakers truly, as you said in your story, swarming the area?
There are more and more people who are swarming the area, particularly in Maryland. Chester County already has quite a few. Maryland has some agricultural incentives. So you have people who have trained on the West Coast, you have people who've trained in the Finger Lakes, who tend now to want to come to areas that are great new prospects, and this is one. Not to say that we don't have a lot of homegrown winemakers who are quite good.
You know, the region here is trying to model itself after the Finger Lakes region in central New York. Do we have a fighting chance to get there?
You do, for many reasons. It's actually a better climate for growing grapes than in the Finger Lakes. Finger Lakes are particularly good for cool weather grapes like Riesling. But here you have a number of grapes that grow very well. Merlot grows very well, the Italian varietals grow very well, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay especially. I keep waiting for someone other than stargazers to make sparkling wine here because it would be a great place to make sparkling wine.
I like sparkling wine. So are they coming here because they're trying to capitalize on the market of people seeking out these experiences?
I think so. The one thing that you have to realize about this market and the East Coast in general is that you don't do business on volume. You do business on margin, which means that you can have a smaller winery, sell direct to customers, sell maybe at a little bit higher price, but they're buying an experience as well as buying the wine.
Now, the organizers here in Delaware canceled the Mid-Atlantic Wine and Food Festival this year. Does that surprise you at all?
Not at all. I think that with all respect to the organizers who did a good job in some areas, they were trying to do too much and it got too diverse, I believe. If they'd concentrated on fewer activities, I think they would have done better.
And maybe just the wine.
Yeah, and just the wine.
Roger Morris, thank you so much for your time. And you can read Roger's story in the November issue of Delaware Today. It's on newsstands now and online at delawaretoday.com.
Roger Morris was a former DuPont employee. Just like J.R. Huntsberger, Huntsberger worked at DuPont for over 20 years. As a child of the Depression, he thought science was a better career choice. When he retired, he felt it was the right time to do what he enjoyed most, and that was painting. First Experience takes you to Huntsberger's Centerville home to see his work.
I've enjoyed art since I was very, very young. My mother and I used to make our Christmas cards. When I grew up, it was in the middle of the Depression, and the choice between art and science was very easy to make. So I got involved in the sciences. I always thought that when I retired, I would have time to really paint, and I did. I couldn't afford art. I couldn't even afford the props. I bought one carnation and I put it in various positions and painted that one carnation in many positions. The painting is of a red vase with various carnations in it. And the red vase was a red rubber balloon that I put some linseed oil on to get reflections. And well, that was the start of my art. When I was in undergraduate school at Bethany College, I got an idea for an abstract, and I sketched it out, and I carried it in my wallet for about 40 years, and I finally painted it after I started painting. I often start by getting a rough idea of what I want, and then just build on it and trying to get the colors and values and edges right. Those are the key points in any painting, are colors, values, and edges, I think. And of course the general likeness. I do all of my still lifes from life. It's different to paint from life than it is to paint from photos, and I enjoy it more. And in a way, I think there's more creativity in painting from life. I usually have something on the easel that I'm working on, and if I get an idea at night about how I can improve it, I can hardly wait to get up and get to the easel. I just hope that whoever gets them will appreciate them rather than wonder about the guy that made them. It's just nice to feel that you're creating something worthwhile.
If you were trying to figure out what the abstract painting in our story is, it's a painting of Charlie Chaplin. J.R. Huntsberger's work is in private and corporate collections all over the world. You can see it in Delaware, too. Go to art-hunt.com if you want to learn more.
First person this week, Delaware State Treasurer Ken Simpler. Ken, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Shirley.
We have a lot of things to get into, but I want to start with, we're nearing the end of your first year, as State Treasurer. How are things going?
I'll let other people judge how they're going. I am excited by the job every day. I am very grateful for the people of Delaware giving me the opportunity. 10 months into it, probably I would say, if anything, the opportunity set is larger than what I thought it was. But the question of being able to do things, being able to be efficacious, actually get things done in government is still something I'm trying to understand and trying to prioritize my time where not only the things are important, but where I think I can actually be effective.
Now, you served on the DFAC Advisory Council on Revenues. Love that title.
Yep.
Now,
try that acronym on for size.
Right. Now, the council looked at where the state earns income, where it spends money, and going back to that income, where it comes from. So, what are our revenue sources, and is there a problem with them?
Well, what I've tried to frame to people that they can get their arms around, and it's not that tough. I mean, people sometimes shy away from numbers, especially if they get big, but, forget the billion on the number. We have $4 billion of spending and roughly $4 billion of revenue. It's a little less, but that's a nice round number. Effectively, Delaware, and the challenge with our revenue system is that we have grown reliant on two sources that together probably generate on the order of magnitude of 2/3 of our revenue. And I'm cheating a little bit because I'm combining what we call abandoned property with our corporate franchise, and those two sort of do go hand in hand. One wouldn't exist without the other. But if you put those together, it might be closer to 70% of our revenues, and that means that we're really reliant on two very substantial streams, and they've been performing. They've been performing quite well over time. But if you pull that abandoned property piece away, and you say that maybe 55% of our revenues come from the personal income tax, the corporate franchise tax, and that abandoned property piece is not something we own, it's not something we can necessarily count on, then you're left with a big piece of the pie that comes from a lot of very small sources that are less than 5%. And are those sources well thought out? Have we constructed that portfolio revenues in a way that really, let's not argue about how much or how little it is, but have we constructed in a way that's the most predictable, that gives certainty to the way we operate our state? Have we constructed in a way that it's predictable, so we're not running around in Dover every year trying to find a couple quarters under the rug?
What were some of the recommendations for a more predictable source of income?
Some of the key recommendations were to look again at it as a portfolio. So we have these two strong performers, but where's the rest of the portfolio and how strong is it? What's the quality of those revenues that we get from those other sources? So one recommendation was we need to focus on building out a little bit of a supporting cast. We got 2 star players, but those star players, to have a diversified, a well-rounded set of revenues, would benefit by having a couple more key supporting cast members. Where are those going to come from? Well, one was to maybe shrink down our reliance on that abandoned property source. One was to look at our 2 business taxes. We have a gross receipts tax and a corporate income tax, and maybe try to pick a best in breed from those 2. And then the long range, suggestion was we really need to focus on what is that maybe 5th component of our revenue system, where we choose not to have a sales tax. We choose to be one of the lowest property taxing states in the country.
An independent study released by the Delaware Business Roundtable says that Delaware is the 7th highest spender on state and local government services. How can we spend smarter, in your opinion?
That was a very telling statistic, and when we sat on the Advisory Council on Revenues, and remember, I've talked about revenues because that was our mission. The spending component, the second piece, or if there's 3 legs of the stool and we get to it in 7.5 minutes, revenue certainty is one. Being certain about where your revenues come from. The second piece was spending discipline. And the third piece that we didn't get on the Advisory Council revenue, but it's been a big focus of mine, is value. It's the intersection of the 2. What do you get for your money? If you spend a lot, you would hope that you get outsized returns, right? Better than average returns than, say, are there 49 states. And if you spend a little, you shouldn't expect to necessarily get much better than what you spend on. The challenging part for us in Delaware is right now, because we get so much money from other people, it's not necessarily our own money. Maybe half of our revenues are effectively exported. We're a high spender. Now, whether that's causality, whether it's easier to spend other people's money because you don't feel it coming out of your own wallet, I would say it's part of the problem. But on average, when you combine state and local spending, and the Business Roundtable study failed to sort of make that distinction, that's really important because some states spend a lot at the local level, some states spend a lot at the state level. So you really have to combine it to get a fair comparison with other states. But when you combine them, Delaware does come out as the 7th, really 6th highest spending state on a per capita basis, and 20% more than the national average. So 20% is a very substantial premium that we need to get our arms around because we're not getting 20% better results.
I do want to get to this one question. You had held a fundraiser recently. What were you raising money for?
It was more, we call it fundraisers, but when I was campaigning, I got to touch people every day. I have been almost, as you pointed out, a year since my election. I haven't had an event. So in part, it was just to reconnect with the people who supported me. So it was not a large ticket event. It was trying to get people back so I could communicate to them for 20 or 25 minutes and just say, guys, here's what I've been up to the last 10 months. And I hope this comports with what you expected when you sent me to the Treasurer's office. But it was a way just around the anniversary of my election of saying, one, thank you. And yes, asking for some more money. We don't want to be completely dormant. When you're in public office, it's easy just to go to Dover every day, which is what I do, and put your head down and try to get the work done. But you have to recognize that you are still a political officer. And so there is, I won't say baggage, but there is, obligations that come with remaining politically relevant and
so
doing
you're not raising money to launch a gubernatorial bid to run against Democrat John Carney next year.
I really thought that was going to be your second question. And no, I can say that I am not going to do that. I am not raising money to do that. I am very happy being the state treasurer, and I think I can add a lot of value to working with the current governor as well as who's our next governor.
Safe to say that you're supporting Republican State Senator Colin Bonini then in the run?
I will be supporting whoever emerges as the winner of the Republican primary for governor.
Okay, Delaware State Treasurer Ken Simpler, thank you so much for your time and thanks for joining us on First.
Very good. Thanks, Shirley.
Fresh off the success of Maurice Hines' Tapping Through Life, the Delaware Theater Company took a different turn with their next production, Playing the Assassin. The author is a Delaware playwright, and it's loosely based on a real-life football incident from the late 70s. But as you'll see, this is not a play about football.
The NFL tried to bury what happened between you and Loud Turner.
Playing the Assassin is based off the real-life story of Jack Tatum and Darryl Stingley. In 1978, Tatum, formerly of the Oakland Raiders, dealt a blow to Stingley during a preseason game against the New England Patriots. That hit left Stingley paralyzed from the neck down. As the story goes, the players reportedly never reconciled, at least not publicly, before they both died.
I started writing the play soon after I soon after I read the obituary, and it almost starts sometimes like a thought experiment. I tried to imagine what it must be like for a man who was a great football player, who was a legendary football player, to have tackled a man. And this one play made a man a quadriplegic. And I thought, to be remembered for one thing, or to have that kind of trail you.
Ezra Knight plays Tatum-esque character Frank, who is approached by network executive Lewis, played by Garrett Hendricks.
I'm the segment producer from CBS who's been sent to tell him about this opportunity. But the only caveat is that he must agree to talk about the incident, which he does not want to do. So my job is to convince him that this is actually a good move for him.
On the surface, this play may look like a story about the repercussions of violence in sports.
Whether or not, as you had alluded to before in our side conversation about whether or not you like football, people will see our poster and go, oh, football, and have their own immediate assumptions about two black men in a story about football.
The actors say they've had some time to get to know these characters and cultivate an understanding of who they are, and they hope audiences will be able to identify with their vulnerability.
I think that the thing about the play is that it because it doesn't revolve around the black experience, it allows you as an audience member to just see two men going through something, and you can, no matter what race you are, or even gender, say, that could have happened to anybody.
Knight says while race is evident, it's not the central focus of this play. He adds it does help enhance the complexity of the characters, but it's the human experience that they hope connects with the audience.
What strikes in this is a universality. That's not, oh, this is black theater. No, it's a multicultural experience that we're unfolding that works.
And maybe this is my own naivete. There was not a moment, at least in the early going, that I thought, I can't write this story because it's about two black men. These are human stories. These are universal stories.
Judging from a talkback session following a preview of the play, the story hits home.
I've been really enormously gratified in the other productions of the play when after the play a woman will come up to me and she knows I'm the playwright and said, you know, or a man, I don't look like football. I have no interest in football. But the play really touched a chord with me because the play is about family, it's about redemption, it's about reconciliation, it's about being judged for that one thing that you've done. And so the hope is that these are universal themes that regardless of your interest in football, you'll be able to connect with.
Playing the Assassin wraps up this weekend at the Delaware Theater Company. Then for something totally different, the next DTC performance will be the stage production of Diner, featuring a score written by Sheryl Crow. Check out DelawareTheater.org to learn more.
And next week on First, a look at the hope behind the East Side Rising project in Wilmington. The hope is that another new start can revitalize that neighborhood. And we introduce you to our education project of first-generation college students.
We'll be joined by Delaware education reporter Avi Wolfman-Arent for that report. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Mark Eichman and Shirley Min, I'm Nichelle Poston. Have a great week.